Hi everybody and welcome to today's Media Masterclass. I guess today we're going to be covering the first in a series around all things paid media. I think on the back of the massive success of the SEO masterclasses, then the Recite Me accessibility audit, and then obviously LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. So we saw that there was quite a lot of appetite out there to learn more about paid media. So yeah, really looking forward to getting through that as we go today. I guess I'd say my name's David Norris. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at MediaWorks, and I'll be hosting to today's MediaWorks Masterclass. Becca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone, I'm Becca. So I sit on the strategic planning team. We sit over a number of accounts, immersing ourselves in your audience, from market trends, where your audiences are, what they want to hear. We really immerse ourselves in that.
Thanks, Becca. And James?
Hi, I'm James. I'm Paid Media Director here at MediaWorks. So I'm overall responsible for the service line that covers paid social, paid search, affiliates, programmatic, pretty much every paid channel under the sun is under my remit. And we work with an extensive range of clients from niche B2B sectors all the way through to big e-com retailers. So lots of experience and hopefully touch on some of those themes today.
Thanks very much, James. And I think to then follow up on this, and I know it for those that have just joined and haven't been before, or those that are regular joiners to the masterclass, we offer on the back of this a free paid media opportunity or audit. We always offer something on the back of the masterclasses. So what you'll see in the chat is there is a link in the chat that people can register by. So if you want to find out more, please do click on the link that's in the chat, and you'll be able to book in an audit, and it'll be with probably myself, James, various members of the paid team to talk you through all things paid media. I guess just to introduce the paid media masterclass, we will be focusing today on maximising paid media ROI. So really looking at sort of really understanding audiences. Where do you spend your money? Where do you see the best investments? How do you make those decisions? We're then following up on the 11th with a session around creative excellence and wrapping everything up with Performance Unleashed. So where we'll talk everything automation and AI. You'll see that James and myself will be pretty constant throughout this, but we'll be joined by a range of colleagues as we go through. So I guess the place I wanted to start, I think it's really important when we're talking about paid media, conscious that we've got a lot of people joining us, and we know that people will be in different stages of their digital maturity cycle, their digital evolution, how much they're using paid media, the range of channels that you're using, etc. So I guess the place to start for me will be, Becca, around that sort of digital landscape.
Yeah, so I think especially when we kind of look at a range of different clients, like David touched on, people are at really different various stages. So really for us, I suppose social media, it is evolving, and I think it's really important as a business that you do sort of keep up with those new, those new channels and those channels that your audience are sitting on, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But I suppose, just really being relevant in that.
Yeah, and I think some of those key statistics are really, really interesting, isn't it? Like, and probably we're all probably resonating with this, like reading the statistics.
Yeah.
It's like 6.86 average number of social platforms used each month. I know we were only talking about social platforms yesterday and which ones we use and how we profile ourselves. But some of the growth that we're seeing, James, is massive.
Yeah, I think social media is like one of the key trends over the last couple of years that has really driven a lot of growth in terms of consumer uptake, but also established huge opportunity for paid media and advertisers to get in front of audiences when they're active and engaged. I mean, 87% of adults in the UK are on social media and can be reached. That is everyone from your CFOs and marketing directors to your everyday consumers. Like, there is a social channel and a route to use social to reach some of those audiences. And I think that is what we need to be thinking about with where a lot of this session is going to be discussing. How do we profile where our audience sits, and how do we communicate, and where should we be communicating with them, and using paid to get in front of them to help drive sales, drive awareness, and really improve our brands and our performance metrics.
Yeah, because I still think, and I think this was the premise of really starting the series with this session, is I still think one of the biggest challenges that we see is still balance of budget, where it sits across the channels and which channels we're actually utilising to reach our audiences. Because I think people probably be surprised by how many times we see we get the opportunity to pitch and we audit a client's account, and we actually see that they're probably spending money in channels that aren't doing the things that they think they're going to do and driving the level of performance that they thought they were going to see. So I think for us, it's really important that you get that channel mix right, and then obviously get your activity type right on those channels. So we know that, I think, user search behavior is changing. So sort of, and again, I think we'll touch on topics like things like social search and how it's all actually sort of changing. It wouldn't be right if we didn't mention things like AI and AI mode and how that's going to change the way that we change and engage with things like large language models. So again, Becca, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, of course. So I think we see it a lot sort of in the strategic planning team, especially when you're looking at, you could look at an audience from, day one of a client coming on board, and then a year later, they're looking at completely different channels. So I think it's just really, and I'm sure James will add to this as well, it's really about just keeping up with when the user search behavior is changing, because it isn't really a one stage fits all approach at all. So I think it's really about understanding, how your users specific to your business are searching and how the nuances of that do change a little bit.
Yeah, I think, the graphic that you see on screen, I think is really, really interesting. The way that search has evolved, and it is still evolving. It was only a month or two ago that Google released its marketing live and the updates that have come out the back of that. But user behavior with the advent of AI has really changed how we're searching. I think the fact that 20% of people are willing to change how their primary search, the search platform has changed is like a really interesting number to think about. And I think what we have to remember there is it's not Google is dying or anything like that. It's not keywords are dead or some of the sensationalist stuff you might read online. It's more just people are using different platforms for different things. Product discovery has been big on social for a number of years now, and it is really the most effective way of finding new products that are relevant to you, and also there's an element of advocacy in that, in the way that they're displayed. You've got the likes of your AI platforms giving you that comparison tool, that recommendation tool, the ability to ask questions and get responses that you never had before. So if we're selling anything, we now need to be thinking about how does our product fit into that user search pattern, and what are we wanting to show, and what are we wanting to use at each stage of that funnel. And I think knowing that gives us an idea of where that audience sits and what we should be doing with each channel and where we should be investing our budget.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important call out, James, in the sense that we have seen so much sensationalism out there, where we've seen Google's dead and this, that, and the other, and people aren't searching anymore. There was 5 trillion searches on Google last year, and you sat there going, people are still searching in a mass scale. And you can see at the bottom right, 80% of people still prefer traditional search channels, but AI and social search is increasing. But I think it's the role that search plays, and really understanding that journey of discovery, and how do you offer a full funnel solution across that customer's discovery, interaction, purchase, post-purchase. It's I think we've always got to be thinking about that now, more than probably we had to 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. The stat there is 29 is the average number of touch points across any product purchase across all industries, but that ranges from anywhere from 15 up to 80.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, a user journey has potentially 80 touch points in your space. Of course, ChatGPT, of course, social is going to become a part of that journey. But we have to remember that it is a journey, and presence, an omni-channel presence, is very important. But also, where are the channels that will give us the biggest impact and the best return on our investment when we're spending money.
And I guess automation. We've talked. It wouldn't be a masterclass, would it, in 2025 if we didn't mention AI, machine learning, automation, etc. But we are seeing a hell of a lot of automation out there, aren't we, James?
Yeah, this I think is the single biggest push since I've been in the industry. I remember days when it was keyword bidding. You were optimizing your CPCs per keyword, and you had full visibility of everything. AI and automation has steadily eroded that and pushed everything on a performance marketing perspective to a broader approach. And that, as marketers, poses a couple of challenges. You from a Google perspective, it's great because it just people are putting money into their algorithm. The algorithm is getting more data to learn, and it's able to work out, and machine learning really is at its peak there because it's got sort of free reign. But from a marketer, we know, and anyone who's ran paid ads will know that, like, your brand searches are getting more expensive these days. Reason for that is broad match. Google is allowing you to, or Google is bidding on terms that it thinks that you might be interested in, which means, or your product might be relevant to, which means it is generally your competitors, etc. So brand search is becoming more expensive for the everyday consumer. You're losing elements of that control, and really automation is pushing us in a sort of broader direction, to the point where now new features like AI Max, which was just released, is sort of locking us in to having to use broad match as a feature there. And I've talked about Google there, but Advantage Plus is the same equivalent on Meta, and all of the channels are going in this direction where performance is driven by broader targeting, and you're ceding control to the algorithm. Now, luckily, due to a little bit of pressure, I think, from us as advertisers, we are getting a little bit more control back. They are adding more visibility across search terms. We're able to use some of those controls to sort of try and refine some of that broad targeting. But it is still a broader approach than maybe it was five or 6 years ago. And I think when if we wanted to ask ourselves the question, is it worth going broad, or do we really want to keep that control? I think the results kind of do speak for themselves. You tend to, like Advantage Plus shopping, we've done many tests on this. It will outperform the more niche, the more detailed targeted pieces. It's just, as advertisers, we need to work out where we put in our controls and where we let AI and automation really drive us forward.
Yeah, I know we talked about this yesterday, James, but we were saying, for me, it's so important that for me, it's about guardrails, and it's about structure, and it's about making sure that you allow machine learning to play to its strengths, but that you're controlling and strategizing. I think the model that we used to see off Google, and speaking frankly, I think every Google event that we went to for like 3 or 4 years, the model was we'd turn up and it would be go broad, take budget caps off, let the algorithm learn. The reality is we've got these amazing things called budgets and KPIs that we need to actually hit, in commercial objectives. So I think for us, it's like, yeah, in potentially some world that may exist somewhere else, it's like that might be the way to go. But actually, for most people, it's about how do you strategically utilize this as a lever versus it being the solution, because it is only simply a lever within a wider tool set, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So from a consumer behavior perspective then, Becca, some amazing statistics that we've seen around the consumer behavior changes that we need to tap into as marketers to really understand where to invest and how to invest.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there has been a rise, obviously, we're all aware of it as, marketers and businesses. There has been a huge rise in mobile search dominance. The average person is on their phone for a long time in the day. And, we spoke yesterday about, 80% of people are on their phone for 6 hours or more a day. That's a really, jarring statistic when you think about it like that. So I think it's really just leaning into the fact that the mobile device is the main search tool in this day and age, and I think being aware of that and knowing where your audience sits within that is a really important tool, especially for us as advertisers.
Yeah, and I think for me it's about how do you achieve that cut through in that really noisy environment, and we were talking about it where we were saying like attention spans are getting shorter, people even switching platforms, etc., on a regular basis. Like, that 6 hour statistic, blows my mind, but the reality is that's where you need to make sure that you utilize some of these tools to make sure and really understand how to utilize your budget and where to invest in paid media to ultimately achieve that cut through, which is so crucial. And again, we talked a little about this, didn't we, James, around like how do you generate demand for product discovery by targeting sort of the movable middle, if you like?
Yeah. I think 2 weeks ago when we did the LinkedIn one, we had a slide where only 5% of buyers are ever in market at any given time in the B2B space. That same theory is true across every segment and every industry. A couple of years ago, there was this movement for this is really actually how channel optimization is built, is that you've got low intent at the bottom, purchase readiness, people who are active in market. That normally tends to be your search. It's easiest to see on search because you're like, I'm searching for X product, etc. Intent is active and it's there. But in that consideration bucket in the middle, that's where people know who you are. They might know of your product. They might have seen it in a shop before. They might have seen an ad, or they just might have a general awareness of what that product might do for them. But at this point, it's about how do we educate and how do we start to give them those building blocks that mean like, actually, I'm moving into that purchase ready. I've been told the USP that's going to drive me to purchase. It's about, that is a very transitional audience that you can target to grow that bottom line. And I think if we only ever focus at that bottom line performance level where people are actively in market, the same as we talked about on the LinkedIn front, you're going to miss out on a huge opportunity, and actually you're going to stunt your growth long term because you're not focusing on trying to move people who aren't in market into market. And obviously the biggest opportunity is people who don't know you exist at all or are not in market at all, and that is where your longer term awareness activity sort of comes in. So I think it's quite a powerful tool when we think about full funnel marketing and how do we use paid media to capitalize on the gaps and the areas that maybe our other approaches, our other routes to sale aren't able to do as well, if we're in a lead gen environment or if we're in a purely e-commerce space as well.
And I think, when we talk about this, it is so important that we understand the consumer process. We did talk about 5% of people being in market in a B2B space and 95% of people not being in market, and like that brand presence, and then the reality of you need to be present across the market so that when they do move into market, you have to be on their list of providers that they're already pre-considering because you've done the qualification process by content, actions, information that they've already consumed. So, and it's very similar in search, I think, and it's so important, isn't it, that we really understand, and I think that's one of the big takeaways for me if you really want to understand ROI, it's about understanding what each channel does, how each audience reacts, and almost treating sort of each audience separately and really understanding what that journey is. And I think we always come to this. I feel like we couldn't do a PPC masterclass without the whole brand versus performance or brand and performance piece. And we get asked this question all the time. I mean, we were at a pitch yesterday, weren't we? And we got asked, so what are our views on brand versus performance and where the split should be? So should we do a little recap of our answer for that, James?
Yeah, I mean, you put me under the spotlight a bit there, because the real answer is there isn't a single source of truth in terms of exactly what your brand versus performance mix should be. It depends what your market situation, what those wider factors are that really influence that decision. Like the safe answer is 70-30, which is that's around about what we've been saying as marketers for years now. But really, it depends where you are. If you're entering into a new market, an international market, like we were talking to the client yesterday about, actually that might be 80, 90, 95% brand.
Yeah.
It's about developing a presence, developing that awareness before we even think about performance marketing, because without that awareness, people aren't going to be there's too much competition out there in the market. And unless we've got a really, really strong USP, we are massively undercutting people on something like price, where it is a very easy decision maker and a very powerful driver. Without having that brand presence, that brand reputation, you're not going to be able to do it. So I think in terms of that balance, there isn't an answer, but I think we need to be considering where we are in our market, what does our share look like versus our competitors, and how much we should be investing into brand. We shouldn't be thinking of brand as a luxury, because ultimately brand does drive performance. And I think campaigns that run elements of brands, so even awareness campaigns with conversion, a base layer, or even just a traffic campaign with a conversion base layer, you will see stronger performance. They will outperform Sometimes even in the short term, but 100% in the long term, they'll outperform the pure performance market.
Yeah, and I think the thing I'd be saying as well, I think that the temptation often for newer brands is to drive the ROI. So it's like, right, we go straight at the bottom of the funnel and we're thinking about performance. And actually you sat there going, it's so hard to achieve cut through there and so expensive. And I think, again, it's about just understanding that as a conscious decision rather than being driven by purely just the numbers and going, oh, well, that's where I'm getting my ROI from. So what I need to do is I need to put all my budget into performance, because there is a massive element that we've worked with brands over the years where, you know, we've seen brands decline and the massive impact that has on performance in terms of then later down the line being able to bank on that brand traffic and that brand I guess conversions is hugely detrimental. So it is something that sort of is such a nuanced conversation. But I think, as you say, it's definitely don't think about just one. Do be thinking about both. So I guess, conscious in the last 10 minutes, we really want to focus on that audience opportunity. And I know that's going to be a real focus of the audit that we produce for people, is really understanding what that opportunity in paid media is and looking at potential forecasts for what we could potentially achieve in those spaces or what you can expect to achieve in those spaces. So I guess for me, what are the importance or what are the key importance aspects of knowing your audience, Becca?
Yeah, I think for us, and I mean, we have this conversation between us quite a lot, that, you know, you're knowing your audience, it's not really a nice to have anymore. It is really fundamental in, you know, driving those conversions and driving good, you know, paid media campaigns. And if we don't really know exactly who we're talking to, we can't communicate them on a level that they're going to understand. So, you know, for us, I think first and foremost, it's about knowing, you know, their motivations, understanding, you know, what makes them, you know, tick, and for want of a better word, I think really understanding what drives them and what's important and where they're going. You know, their desires are really, really important, especially to us, I think, as a strategic team. And then I think secondly to that, it is their habits and behaviors. So, you know, knowing where they sit, where they spend their time. You know, we talk a lot about social and how much people are spending online. So I think knowing, you know, which channels they're really on is ultimately going to drive a good campaign. You know, there's no point advertising to them on Meta if they're not on Meta at all. So that's really important. And I think then thirdly, and, you know, ultimately, in my opinion, really quite important is the pain points. So I think it's all well and good, you know, knowing where your audience sits and what motivates them. But if you're not talking to them with their language of, you know, if price, for example, you know, we talk about that a lot, if that's important to them, should a price be in our messaging is something we can really talk about and engage with them.
Yeah, and I think we talk about that, don't we, in terms of, I think we often refer to it as like moments of need, do you know what I mean, or moments of pain. And I think like what we're seeing, and it's really interesting, isn't it, when you think about sort of conversational AI and conversational search and where that's going, because that is what people are doing. They're adding more context to a search. So you're starting to see more of these pain points emerge. Absolutely. So I guess audience profiling process is like something I wanted to really focus on and share with people. Yeah,
and I think this is just really about, you know, turning demographics from a business with no insight into an opportunity and like an actionable takeaway. So, you know, a lot of the time demographics don't really tell us why somebody is purchasing or engaging or converting. So I think really uncovering the motivations, especially a lot of the time now, we're seeing a lot of clients that give us their first party data, which obviously to us is like instrumental in being able to uncover that second layer audience, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think that's where our insights team plays a massive part, really interrogating that data that we see in terms of, so, you know, it's Pareto's principle, isn't it? It's 80-20, and it always holds out about right, where, you know, 80% of your profits come from 20% of your customers. The real key is finding who they are and really understanding those audiences and customers.
Absolutely, and I think being able to sort of enable that first party data, looking at your audience, it really enables like smarter segmentation for us and especially for you guys as well and what you guys do. More relevant messaging is a huge one, better channel alignment like James was saying before, and then stronger creative impact.
Yeah, and that for me really then drives how we move forward a campaign. And again, and we won't go through this because I think we've covered this in previous masterclasses, but, you know, for me, it's so important that we do build out that persona. And you can see sort of we use Global Web Index for this, but it's so important that we understand, like, what are the business challenges of a particular audience? What are the purchase influences? Price always comes into it, by the way, it's hilarious. But then we've got brand discovery. So how do they discover brands, useful content, which channels are on? Like this for us then really fuels sort of that insight into opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think especially, you know, it's not a one size fits all approach. I think we talk about this a lot in the nuances of, you know, whether you're an owner founder in construction or whether you're an owner founder in, you know, cloud solutions, they are nuances that you do have to acknowledge a lot of the time.
Yeah, and it is so important, isn't it, that when you do this, it's like, from our perspective, it really is about how do you use that. And we talk about like turning data into insight, you know, and for me, it's then insight into action.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's so important. And I think so many times organizations do this as part of a business planning cycle, and it's like we do it at the start of the year, and then it's like we've got to redo our marketing plan and we have another look at the audience, and you start going, we see some quite significant shifts as the year develops, don't we, even within single audiences. So this for me is one of those areas that you've got to review, because it should be stuff that's informing your creative messaging and your channel selection and your budget distribution as you go through. And I guess, James, from a social media perspective alone, like this is really important, isn't it, in terms of how advertising spend is shifting across platforms?
Yeah, I just thought this was just a useful, just when we're looking at where the opportunity is, just understanding that like social media is dominant, and actually where some of these platforms actually sit, because we all have preconceived notions sometimes that that like depending on your generation and what you use, those are the biggest channels. But actually, like YouTube is by far and away the has the most users and the most coverage, but it is the biggest brand driver, and it's not really a performance driving channel. Whereas Facebook and Instagram like really do cover an awful lot of that. And like you when you look at the numbers of people that you can reach, it does give you an idea of what that opportunity could be. So I think it was just an interesting bit of statistics that I thought I'd share.
Yeah, and I think seeing things like TikTok climb that chart over the last 3 or 4 years has been amazing. And I think, you know, again, it's really interesting, isn't it, seeing the shift in YouTube. It's a product that Google are obviously pushing enormously and have been for a while now. But again, I think it is a bit of a sleeping giant that a lot of people overlook in terms of that brand piece and the targeting capabilities. So I think it's a really important one to finish on. So from a campaign planning perspective, James, the last few minutes.
Yeah, so I think in terms of how do we maximize our return from the paid media that we put in, I think we need to first of all look at what is the objective. Are we in a new market, or are we in a established market where we want to drive like uptick in sales? And the platforms guide you through this with an optimization as the first stage, but that is the first challenge I put to any advertiser, is actually what are we trying to achieve commercially? What is the business objective? And that will guide the next sort of stages in this process. And
which is choosing your channels.
Choosing your channels, yeah. So these are like, I mean, this is just a top line screenshot, but we do need to look at and assess which channels give us the best opportunity for each market and for each audience. How do we Google is very expensive in certain industries, but much cheaper in others. LinkedIn obviously is a more expensive channel. Programmatic display offerings, there's a huge range of different things in that individual space. Give you a lot of traffic generally, but conversion tracking can be dubious. It depends on how we look at it. Each channel has its own nuance, and we need to think about, in relation to our audience and where our audience sit, how do we select the right channel that's going to be cost effective and effective against whatever the objective is that we're going at.
Yeah, and that selection is so important, isn't it? And it's then about how do you then bring them on that journey. And again, we won't touch a lot on this. People must understand funnels in the marketing space, but I think the big takeaway for me is we are seeing platforms now talk about being full funnel solutions. That's been one of the big things. It used to be search sat here, Meta sat there, TikTok sits over here, and all we hear now from all the platforms is we're full funnel solutions.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting that we saw a couple of slides ago that YouTube has one of the biggest reach out there. Google's demand gen function has pretty much just replicated a Meta campaign in a Google platform. They're using all their inventory to try and give you a sort of full funnel approach. They've even added stuff like carousel ads and that sort of thing. So actually, if you're running Meta campaigns and you want to dabble with YouTube, actually most of your assets are just quick and easy to translate across. But it is that approach to full funnel, to keeping everything, to having interaction with the user across all their different touch points and really take them on that journey all the way through.
Yeah, I think for me, to summarize, I would always say it's understand your objectives, understand the channel so you can make informed channel decisions, and then really understand where you actually want to distribute your budget in each of these areas, and then consider the applications. And I think it then comes down to a structural conversation, like how you want to structure your activity to really drive that performance forward. And I guess key considerations, we often finish with this slide, James, but you know, there's a range, so clear campaign objectives, understanding your audience, selecting the right channels, use of first-party data became an enormous point, budget allocation, how you weight the budget across those different areas, not getting into the brand versus performance discussion again, but then audience first creative, which we'll cover in the next masterclass, where we'll be looking at all things creative and how you achieve that cut through. The seamless user journey, and really that point at the end, like it's still very much test and learn. Like, this isn't a set it and come back in a month and have a look. This is active, proactive management about what is performing, what are you seeing working, what are you not, and then reallocating, which I think is so important in terms of that proactive management of accounts, because I do think that one of the challenges you get to is the platforms almost sell it as, no, you can just set it and off you go, whereas actually it's so important that you are doing that regular optimization and that you've got a really clearly defined test and learn strategy. I'm really conscious of a recap, and we'll just finish by saying we have a think, do, measure approach here at MediaWorks. So it's understand your audience, develop a customer-centric strategy in terms of, and then deliver on that strategy. And then the measure elements around that continuous and iterative improvement, that's so important in terms of really understanding the what you were trying to achieve, to your point, James, previously around objectives, and then into performance and activity, and then into measuring how you did against those performance, really allows you to see where you should be investing, where you need to adjust, and really where you can sort of drive those actions that are going to make sure you get that your own brand, or the own balance of brand and performance versus a whole host of other things correct as you go through that conversion piece. So I guess all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for everybody who's attended today's MediaWorks Masterclass. You can, as I say, my penultimate point is we are offering free paid media opportunity for an opportunity audit that people can access. So again, if people want to learn more, do sign up via the chat, the link that's in the chat right now, and we'll also send it out via email afterwards, where we can walk you through what that opportunities might look like. And finally, just to say, James and I will be back, without Becca this time, but we'll be back to talk all things PPC with a focus on creative on Friday the 11th, and then Performance Unleashed, where we're going to be talking all things AI and touching a bit deeper on some of the things that we've covered today on the 25th, and we'd really look forward to you joining us then. So thank you very much to yourself, James, and to yourself, Becca. Hope you've enjoyed the session, and thank you for everyone who's joined us for another MediaWorks Masterclass.